Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the Chai Center. Welcome to the Chai Academy, and welcome to this current course called Jewish Ethics and Beliefs. So we've done a considerable amount of classes here on this topic, and I guess we have a long way to go. Today's discussion is about emotions, the ethics of emotions, good emotions and bad emotions. So we're taught in the book of Tanya, the book of practical applied Kabbalah, that most of our emotions come from the same source and can be directed to the good or to the bad. Most of our emotions. Tanya specifically, as not only Tanya but other places also talk about that there is one emotion that is absolutely has no redeeming value and strictly comes from a bad place, and that would be the emotion of anger, unbridled anger, raw anger, uncontrolled anger. So anger, as Tanya puts it aptly, is an emotion of absolutely no redeeming qualities. Maimonides says that when a person gets angry, we're talking about an anger where you just lose yourself. You have no self-control. It's not a feigned anger. It's not a partial anger. We're talking about anger where your blood is boiling and you're yelling like a maniac, or you're just you have dots in front of your eyes, or you go dizzy from anger. That type of anger, Maimonides says, is like worshiping idols. Now, doesn't just say it's a bad thing, but rather worshiping and idols is literally one of the worst things one can do. It's a very denial of God, very denial of faith, of who you are intrinsically. So that's what Maimonides says, and the Alter Rebbe in Tanya explains why. So he says as follows, that when a person loses their temper and gets angry, furious, is essentially they're not worshiping God, but rather at that point of time they're worshiping themselves. They're so angry, they're so riled up because it's all about them. It's all about them, right? Think about it. When somebody hurts you, and it's to the point where you're just you're so bent out of shape, the only thing you can think about is, how could they do this to me? Right? That is the emotion that comes up. Me, look what they did to me. They didn't respect me. They didn't respect how I would feel, how I would react. They didn't take me into consideration. These are the type of things. So you're not thinking about God, you're thinking about yourself. And that is tragic. Because at that time, one is not, absolutely not, thinking about God. You're completely removed from God, completely. It is and that's how the author of the Tanya explains the idea that you're an idol worship, because you're worshiping something other than God. You're worshiping yourself, and that is idol worship. And in fact, ego is an acronym of easing God out. Easing God out. It is it is reprehensible. Ego, the arrogance, etc. It's reprehensible. Now, there's actually a line in the Talmud I use often because, listen to the line. The line that Tanya talks about the arrogant. Hold on a second. I think I may have found the problem. So I just interesting. It's talking about I have low resolution here. So the Talmud, the line in the Talmud is as follows. The Talmud says, as far as the arrogant person, the person full of pride and arrogance, he says, Ein ani v'hu yachol ladar be'ir achas. Both he and I can't live in the same city, the same town, the same space. The arrogant person and God can't live together. Because when you're arrogant, you've left no room for anybody else. And the reason why I laugh is because essentially John Wayne said the same thing. This town ain't big enough for the both of us. Hello, Eileen. So the arrogance is terrible. Ego is terrible. To be egocentric is horrific. And when a person just focuses on themselves, they're not focused on God at all. That's not true with other emotions. Other emotions, sadness, you're not thinking about God. You're sad. You're not pushing away God. In Tanya, when it talks about that when a person gets angry, and the Tanya says, and clearly the Alter Rebbe says this, and it's pretty much in quoting you verbatim, albeit not verbatim, but it's an indirect quote where the Alter Rebbe says that when you get angry that something happened to you, it means that you don't believe that God is doing what's best for you. You don't believe that God has many emissaries. And instead of trying to figure out and be angry at the person, and that person who does it to you, says Tanya, is culpable, because how dare they do that to you? But as far as God is concerned, God is sending you a message. And instead of being angry, try and figure out what the message is. Hello, Don, and welcome. Welcome to the neighborhood. Welcome to our class. What is the message? What is God trying to teach you? So when you're sad about something that happened to you, true, maybe we can extrapolate and say that the Alter Rebbe would say the same thing. What is the message here? But sadness is not negating God, whereas anger is. That's what the Alter Rebbe posits in Tanya. So sadness is oh, oy vey, I feel sad. It happened to me. I struggle with what happened, but I'm not angry, because when I'm angry, I leave no room for God. The Alter Rebbe does mention, by the way, that depression, which is not sadness, not to be confused with sadness, depression, not a clinical depression either. Depression that you allow the sadness to continue unchecked also has no redeeming value, but for different reasons. Depression is essentially is what are you going to do with it? Right? Where does it lead you? Where does depression lead you? We know sadness can lead you to listening to the message. Frustration. Loss, grief, right? passion, other emotions, they lead you to somewhere. And sadness can lead you to somewhere, affect change, right? But where does depression lead you? Nowhere. You just spiral worse and worse and worse until you get to hopelessness, which can be an end game for you. Just hopelessness, and you give up. So the emotions are by definition parav, neutral. We can use them for our betterment, or we can take these emotions and we can throw out the baby with the bathwater and completely hurt ourselves with these emotions. But two emotions we have to be careful of. One is anger, because that's idol worship. And the other one is depression, because it leads to nowhere. It basically flushes you down the toilet, and you end up in a septic system. Just nowhere to go. Another problem, by the way, with ego and arrogance is that God created this world, and He created it from nothing into something. We are a product of God. We were created from nothing. God took nothingness, and this whole world was created from nothing. And our job is to take this something that God created out of nothing and revert it back to godliness, to nothingness. Yes, that we don't have an independent existence other than God, but rather we exist because of God's graces. We exist because God wants us to. We exist because we have a mission. When a person is arrogant and egomaniacal, egocentric, is basically they've taken that nothing that God made into something, and they've made that something into something more, instead of reverting it back to godliness. Instead of uplifting it into godliness, we've now sidetracked it and made it into ourselves. It's all about ourselves. It's all about us. When it shouldn't be about us, it should be about God, about the base, our foundation. So it's all about the base. I'm sure you've heard that before. Now, if we're moving along with these good emotions, bad emotions, so passion is a good emotion to have. You're passionate about something. You're passionate about your spouse. You're passionate about your kids. You're passionate about your life, your family, your God, your Torah, your mitzvahs, your mission. You're passionate, right? Now, of course, if you're passionate about negative things, someone else's spouse, that's negative. So passion is good if it's directed good. Passion could also be bad if it ends up in the wrong place. Passion can turn to anger. We have to be careful about that. To grieve over loss is okay, is a good emotion. You're supposed to grieve. To become depressed, it's no good. To be passionate about something is good. To be angry about something is no good. To move quickly, alacrity, is good. If you move too quick without thinking is bad. To move too slow is no good. To be a sloth is no good. To be somber and think about things and reflect is good. To be melancholy is no good. So that's what Tanya means when it says it all comes from the same source, is we take the emotions and we need to direct our emotions to make sure that they remain in the right place and not in the wrong place. To be happy is a big mitzvah. To be happy at a loved one's funeral makes you a big fool. To be serious on Yom Kippur makes sense. To be serious when one of the greatest things ever happened to you, your child was born, and you can't get out of your own serious funk, and you're saying, oh, the child is born, and now I'm going to have to do this, and I have to do this, and I have to do this. Enjoy the moment. Your child's getting married. Enjoy the moment. It's not a time to be serious and right? So, you know, by the way, arrogance and pride come from the same place, but one is good, one is negative. Arrogance is no good, but to have pride, and to have pride, you're supposed to have pride. Give up. It could be both. I give up. It could be very negative. Right? I give up. Or it could be, I give up. I'm not going to fight it anymore. I can understand, and I give up because so give up, hopelessness is very bad. But to give up, to say, I'm not going to fight my spouse on this matter anymore. I'm going to give in. Giving could be very bad, but giving could be incredibly good. Stubbornness could be a terrible trait. But stubbornness is what has kept the Jewish people alive, with the Romans, with the Greeks, with the Babylonians, the Assyrians, are lost. We're a stiff-necked people, and it was given to us as a negative. But oh my goodness, thank God we're stiff-necked because we're still here. The very fact, walk around in the street with a Star of David, or the Chai, or a yarmulke, is a sign of stubbornness. That no, I'm proud of who I am. Not only am I not the majority, not only there is a lot of me, but I am 2% of the United States population. I'm 0.2% of the world's population, and I still proudly wear a Chai, a Star of David, a mezuzah. I still proudly wear a kippah. That takes a certain stubbornness to be able to do that. So that's where stubbornness is good. Question was posed by Eileen: if someone is clinically depressed, right? You know, a person is clinically depressed, they got to get help, and there's nothing wrong with it, nothing whatsoever, nothing wrong. A person has an ingrown toenail, you go to the doctor, podiatrist. You know, you have a cavity, you go to the dentist. Right? You have high blood pressure, you go to the doctor, the internist. If you have clinical depression that you cannot shake, it could be there's a serotonin issue, it's being inhibited. There's a chemical imbalance, and you need help. Big deal. Big deal. So it's not a bad thing. We're talking about where depression. We're talking about is where you're steeped in it, and you're happier in this depressed place than you are in a happier place. That's a problem. To be upset that you're depressed is a good sign. To be comfortable in your depression is a bad sign. I think that is the crux of the issue. So if you're not passionate, if you're not, when your child is walking on the street and it gets too close to the road, there's something wrong with you. Because get away from the street. You know, you yell and scream. You have to be passionate. If you can't bring yourself to be passionate there, then you're a cold emotional stone. You're a brick. That's not good either. So, right? But to be too passionate over nonsense is bad. So what I'm saying in essence is everything in moderation. And Maimonides says this, that a person has to live middle of the road. You can't be too one way or the other. You can't be too much passion, too little passion. Too much anger and not feel any type of pride would be on the other side of the pendulum. You have to be in the middle. If your child does something really bad, drugs, if you're not upset and even angry, then it's bad. You have to be upset. You have to be angry. You have to. You have to. And if you're not, if you just laugh it off, you're stupid. But you need to. But the question is, are you lose it where you say such terrible things to one's child that you actually lose your child? That's uncontrolled anger. It can never be that. So you get the idea. You get the idea. Stay in the middle of the road. There are sometimes you have to get out of your comfort level and not be in the middle of the road. Move to one side or another. But for the most part, you have to stay middle of the road. And to have a little anger, a feigned anger, is fine and appropriate at times. If you lose your temper, it's wrong. It's wrong. And your poor family, by the way, if you lose your temper. And there's something called anger management, right? Any questions? Pleasure. Pleasure's appropriate. A person should want to have pleasures appropriate. Whatever the pleasure is, right? Food, vacation, intimacy, whatever the pleasure is. But everything in moderation. You enjoy a beer, okay, you have a beer. 17 beers is no good. Vacation is great, but you can't be on vacation forever. 10 days is great. To take a year off round the world cruise, you have responsibilities. You can't take off. You gotta, you have a family, you have a job, you have your kids, your grandkids, whatever the relationship may be. Everything has to be in moderation, clearly in moderation. Sadness in moderation. Everything's got to be in moderation. Everything is balanced, and that's a trick to life, by the way. That is the trick. Balance. We should try and keep that scale balanced, and balance, and sometimes, yes, you got to be a little unbalanced to correct something. Maimonides, in fact, in Hilchos Teshuvah, the laws of Teshuvah, he says that sometimes you have to swing all the way to the other side, and then let the pendulum swing back. So a person who's an addict, right? A person who's an addict, a sex addict, may have to be told, or an alcoholic, right? You got to stop drinking, which is all the way on the other side. All the way. And you got to attend Alcoholics Anonymous. It's all the way on the other side from being an alcoholic. But sometimes you need the pendulum to swing. So how does aging? So the good news about there's bad news. The laws do make you appreciate that, right? A person who wins the lottery doesn't really appreciate money. A person who worked hard for their money does. But the question about how does aging? The good news about aging is with aging comes maturity. And I've always wondered, when I was 20 years old, and I hear people complaining about their aches and pains. I said, how do they have life? How do they live life? And this hurts and that hurts, and feel a little better today. And then it happens to you because you have this emotional intelligence and you have a certain maturity. you handle it. You handle it. And even mortality, the older you get, the better you handle mortality. Right now, at my age, mortality makes me makes me shake in my boots. But the aging itself, right? What does it say? That ben aboim labina, when you turn 40, you have a certain maturity. When you turn 50, you have a certain wisdom. When you turn 70, you have sage counsel, right? And you so the older you get, and that's the good news. The older you get, the more you'll be able to. I never understood a therapist, a social worker, who graduated at 23 and all of a sudden they're my social worker. I would never. I don't understand it. How does a 70-year-old go to a 23-year-old social worker? I don't believe they can. Right? I believe that life's experiences is half the social work psychology battle. So I believe a 24-year-old should work with kids, and a 30-year-old should work with 20-year-olds, and somebody who's 50 years old now. You've lived life, the good, the highs, the lows, the goods, the bads, the ins and the outs, and the ups and the downs. I think you can be a great social worker, and you're lucky to get somebody who has life experience. So aging does give you wisdom, absolutely. So most things, moderation. Certain things you have to let the pendulum swing. You must let the pendulum swing one way or another. If you're cold individual and you're an emotional stone, you have to force yourself to smile. Force yourself to go to the wedding and stay there and actually participate in a dance. Right? You got to let the pendulum swing. We should be blessed with balance. We should be blessed with good emotions. May God protect us from negative emotions. May God protect us from negative people that bring out negative emotions, that trigger us. Triggering is a big component of this. So some people trigger you, and you gotta, an abusive parent triggers you. Limited interaction, my friends. That's the best way. We will talk again. If you want to see previous classes at thechaycenter.com/academy. If you wish to see written works on a similar vein, then you go to thechaycenter.com/podcasts or thechaycenter.com/book. A lot to glean, a lot to learn, and constantly have to learn. God bless. Be well. Thank you all.